And here we are. It's the final session of the day.
Yeah.
So finally at 8, Jeffrey appears with tales of Cliptalk and conquering fears. From Twitch's depths, his app took flight. A journey through code and into the night.
Oh man! How do
Hello,
I?
yeah.
Hello. How do I top that? Holy crow! That was great.
I just wish I could say that I wrote it myself.
Ah,
It's all in the presentation, Stacey.
Can you tell that I really wanted to be an actor but never quite managed to get into it?
so what I've learned in my career is don't say no to something. There's always opportunities later in life. There's folks that have gotten into acting and music and writing and development later in life. You never know. There's
Never
always
know.
opportunities.
Don't
I
tell
need
her
to
to
start
leave
looking
tech,
for it.
Jeff.
I can do both.
Yeah, both is good.
Sure.
Both is
What do
good.
you think streaming is? Half of streaming is acting and telling stories. Yes.
Absolutely. It's like my first talk that I ever did on stage, it's rated back in 2019. It was telling a story, and it was basically a monologue.
And I'm going to be doing a bit of that with this session. I've got 60 some slides that we're going to go through and talk about. Yeah. Cliptalk. What an application.
It was awesome.
Don't give away the end. Stacey just walked into the movie Titanic and said, "Man, I hate icebergs." Let me tell you, icebergs.
And on that note, I'll let you take it away.
I watched tons of the development of Cliptalk, though, and that was awesome content.
Yes.
I'd like to know even more.
All right.
Yes.
Let's talk a
So
little bit about this. Yeah, there we go. So I have some slides to share. Thank you. There we go. So thank you so much, Stace and Eric, for getting me set up here and asking me to join and talk about my journey through and talking about an application that we built live on stream called Cliptalk. You know what? I think I may have done something. You know what? I need to stop and reshare my screen because I need to share some audio. I have a video in here that I forgot about. Give me 1 second here. Yeah, let me reshare my screen. Thank you so much, friends. Appreciate your patience. Yes, also share system audio. And there we go. Good. All right. And let's see how this goes and see if I don't screw it up too much. You'd think I've never live streamed before. Thank you, Saber. So I'll be, of course, watching chat and answering because I do a little thing called live coding. My name is Jeff Fritz. You may have seen me on the YouTubes, on the Twitch. You can find me on the GitHub, Twitter. Can we still call it Twitter or X? I'm in all the places. I'm C# Fritz out there. But I do a little thing here. Why didn't that update? It's so much fun when things don't work the way you expect them to. You know? We're going to have to stop and restart the slideshow. That's wonderful. No, it's not advancing my slideshow. 1 second. I'm sorry. I had everything all set up. All the best laid plans suddenly stopped working. My apologies. Let's do this one more time. There, it's not doing my presenter view and advancing. Fine. We'll do it this way. So I do a little thing called live coding. So I'm a host, typically on camera, writing software, answering questions, interacting with viewers, so folks like you out there. And it's HGTV, right? It's Home and Gardens Television, but for geeks. Right? That's kind of the thing we do. And it works out and it's a lot of fun. And I really enjoy sharing that and having that good time with folks as we're building and talking about software together. Let me try that one more time here. Is it going to give me my presenter view? No. Even though I've told this use presenter view, you're not going to do it. Really, PowerPoint? Really? You're going to be this difficult? Last chance. Hey, there it goes. All right. All right. I think we're in a better place now. So I present, and you can find me. I mentioned C# Fritz. You can find me on Twitch TV/C# Fritz. I've been streaming there since November 2017. I've been broadcasting there literally 2 or more times a week for years now. Right? We're coming up on is it 7 years? 7 years coming up here. I became a Twitch affiliate in January 2018. I became a Twitch partner in February 2019. If those don't mean anything to you, don't worry about it. It just means that Twitch thinks I'm pretty okay at broadcasting over there. Right now we have about 23,000 followers, and we average a little bit more than 100 concurrent viewers on every stream. So we've got a pretty good group that comes through and watches every one of my streams. Now, I'd been streaming for some time, and in 2020, we got an idea. We got an idea, and when you build things live on stream, what's important is that you have a good idea for something that either you're going to build and finish all in one stream, or it's going to be that long-term project that folks tune in to watch and experience it growing. And when I build things live on my stream, I want to make sure that they're things that you can reach out and touch. Okay? More than just watching this face yap at you. I want you to be able to actually touch the software. Go out there, go to a website, take a look at the source code somewhere, and interact with it. So we had an idea. I wanted a long-running development project so that you could see a real website running and be able to use and connect with my stream and other content. Now, I had heard from folks in 2020 saying, Blazor, it's not really supported by Microsoft. No one has a cool website that uses it. Microsoft doesn't even build their own websites with Blazor. So, gosh, it's not real. It's not important. It's not something that they're actually investing in. Like, no, that's very much all not true. So I wanted to be able to address that by putting something out there that used Blazor. I also wanted folks to be able to start to discover Twitch clips. Twitch clips are a way for you to grab a minute, maybe 2 minutes worth of content and isolate it and create that little highlight that you can share. Send it over to your friends and you have a good laugh, you enjoy, maybe you learn something from it. But to grab that highlight and be able to share that. And TikTok was becoming a big thing. I wanted folks to be able to share clips that same way that they do on TikTok. And I also heard this. I don't know anyone using Microsoft Azure to build something cool for the web. Nobody uses Azure. Everybody uses this service or that service or even the other one over here. And who uses Azure? So I wanted to do a little bit of myth busting and do all of these things with an application that folks could latch onto and see and observe and point to and say, hey, here's something that's fun and cool, built with Blazor, runs on Azure, and it helps me find some of the cool stuff that I like to watch on Twitch. So yeah, nobody uses Azure for cool stuff. All the cool kids go to some other service over here. I don't know about it. So here, I wanted to bring together Azure, put things on GitHub, bring in a little bit of Blazor, and do it all on Twitch. And that's what became Clip Talk. So we're going to pull all of those development tools together, and we want to have some social fun with videos. So I took a 12-hour stream on my 3-year stream anniversary. It was November 2020, my 3-year stream anniversary, and we started working on the initial concepts for Clip Talk. And I happen to have a clip I've just announced this morning called Clip Talk that is going to make Twitch clips available in a TikTok-like interaction. Yeah. And we're using Blazor to allow you to do that interaction and have a very rich experience there. I just did a reload and it found that. That's right. I did a reload and it found it. Look, this was the first episode. You can see I still had 9.5 more hours broadcasting. I set up for a 12-hour broadcast. Here we are, 2.5 hours in, and I've got an initial title bar. I've got it presenting some clips and making them visible for folks to visit. These were all hard-coded links at that time, and we were able to get folks to interact with and see a website that presents Twitch clips. Yeah, I know we heard that part, Jeff. So we started building on Azure, and we used Blazor WebAssembly with Azure Static Websites. You might have heard a little bit about Azure Static Websites in the rest of the event here today. I don't know. And what was important here was this was a system that had a community feel. It was being developed live on a stream. You could tune in a couple times a week and find me working on it. It was built on stream by a streamer for other streamers. So very community connected tool that would allow folks to work with Twitch. This tool, we designed it and set up so it would synchronize with various channels that were chosen and make clips easy for anyone to discover. We didn't want to edit clips. We just wanted to discover what was already published and out there and make those visible for you. And at this time in November 2020, we had 5 clips that we chose. We hard-coded into a JSON file, and that's what we used for this initial load when we presented and showed it. You don't know what qualifies as cool, says Fuel Snable? Well, what do you see? I think we did some very cool stuff with this application. So what were our initial tech choices? And when you do a minimum viable product, and that first step in and say, hey, is this possible? Can we do something with this? Well, we started with Azure Static Websites. It was in preview state at that point, so I could use it for free. Blazor WebAssembly, I already knew a bit about, so it worked on Azure Static Websites, so we could do that. Additionally, I set up some Azure functions that would run next to it as another Azure function application to help synchronize data. So we would have the API that ran as functions with our static website that would allow us to retrieve and search through our data store, and we'd have another set of Azure functions out there that would update and synchronize data from Twitch. Initially, I decided to save data in Azure Table Storage using Azure Queues and blobs. Azure Storage is very, very reliable, so let's use those. We could render JSON inside those blobs, so we can cache and load them inside of our Blazor application by just saying, go request the blob that's fixed, it's sitting on disk, and it has all the information for that thing. It gets cached aggressively. We don't have to worry about querying and looking for things. It's just a JSON file, and serving it out of Azure Blob Storage, very quick, very reliable. We wanted to use Azure Front Door and use an app service because we know that Blazor WebAssembly at the time didn't have pre-rendering. So when the search engines came through, they wouldn't see the content that Blazor WebAssembly would render. That's a problem. So how do we get around that? Well, we stood up an app service that sat next to it that had a torn down version of those same Blazor pages running in ASP.NET Razor pages that it would paint and show things at the same address. And Azure Front Door would detect that it was a bot that was connecting in. And if a bot, whether it was from Twitter, going to present content about something that was shared, or Facebook or LinkedIn, or maybe it was the Google bot or Bing bot coming through to do search engine indexing, they would be rerouted over to the fake service and get the information that was served up in clear text and heavily output cache, so that we didn't have to worry about the interactions that were happening that we wanted for our rich interactive WebAssembly website. So really cool stuff to separate that and make it easier to deliver for the bots that don't care about styling so much. You know what I mean? We also decided, let's use Blazor with WebAssembly as a progressive web app to support a mobile interaction. So you could bookmark the ClipTalk website and it would cache some of that information locally, and you'd be able to get a rich interactive application running with WebAssembly on a phone, a tablet, and just connecting back to get only the data they need, just the way that Azure Static Websites should be running with those functions that have the HTTP triggers. So let's talk about that initial architecture. Let's put up a graphic here. Look at that. Fritz does graphics, and they're all in purple and yellow. All right. So look, the Azure Static website is over here on the left, and we had that backend API, right? We know our functions live inside there, and I had ClipTalk client project. That's where my WebAssembly was running. Okay, so the WebAssembly is running on the bottom, the functions up there, and that was the Azure Static website that I initially created. It would query and load data out of table storage, and I had a series of other functions out there that ran in a project that I called ClipTalk Back Office, and there were many functions that ran over there. As Back Office would run, it would save clips for a channel into a blob and save it in JSON format and save that out into blob storage. Simple architecture, and for the first few months as we're building that minimum viable product, not bad, right? And a lot of folks watched and saw those first couple streams as I was building and ideating as I was designing the initial concepts for the ClipTalk application. But then we ran into this problem. We hard coded the first 5 clips. How do we start synchronizing data from Twitch? How do we start getting new data from Twitch, new clips as they're being created? Well, we decided that we wanted to keep the clip video on Twitch. We saw other folks that were downloading clip videos. There were a handful of other services that were trying to do something similar to what ClipTalk was doing, but they were actually downloading, reformatting, and putting watermarks and other things onto the videos that were coming off of Twitch. Storing video is big and expensive. I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to index and get people back to Twitch to see those videos to help with discovery. So by not so much downloading video, but download just the metadata about it. Here's where it's located. Here's the name of it. Here's when it was created. Here's who created it, the channel it's from, and so on and so forth. It would force video views back to Twitch. So even though you were watching the video on ClipTalk, you were actually watching the Twitch clip embedded viewer. Great. This means also that if the clip is withdrawn from Twitch for copyright reasons or any other legal concerns, it was automatically withdrawn from ClipTalk. It automatically, even though ClipTalk had a record for it, when ClipTalk would go and try and present it and saw that it would get an error coming back, we could send a message back down into the back office and it would automatically clean up that record. Fantastic. So we wrote a very simple process that would run in that back office. Go and detect new clips, add them to the clips table, and publish notifications to go and rebuild those channel JSON files. So that started to work, but we can't receive notices from Twitch when new clips are created. Twitch doesn't have a webhook or a notification that they send out as clips happen. Okay. So the first hack that we had to put together was, let's search Twitch for new clips for the channels that we know and we're indexing and we're interacting with. And we know the last time we searched. So let's do a search and we can use that timestamp to go look and determine, hey, what's been created since then? And we'd go load that up and add those additional clips to the data store. When we search one channel at a time, we hit an API that looked like this: get API Twitch TV, Helix clips, the broadcaster ID, C# Fritz, and we could run up to 80,000 queries a minute. That's a lot. 80,000 queries a minute. No, it's not. When in the scope of how big Twitch is or how big YouTube is, 80,000 queries isn't a lot. That's pretty fast, but it's not a lot. We know that most clips are created while streams are live. So we could scale that down. We can search Twitch for live streams and identify how many streams are live of the ones that we know. Of those, let's go of the ones that are live that we are indexing, let's identify 100 at a time and search those to see if there's new clips. So for the first 100 channels on the site, we searched in the first query, how many channels are live? Maybe it's 20. And then in the next 20 queries that we run, because we've got 80,000 queries we can run for each channel, do you have any new clips? This meant then that we weren't searching for all of the channels that we knew about. And at the start, we only knew about 3 or 4 channels, but it would quickly grow. We also learned that while we were doing this channel querying and loading, don't save that data while you're syncing. Don't do that, because then you're waiting for the database, and then you're going to run into contention because you have multiple Azure functions that are querying and loading and syncing and want to send data back. So what we did was we started looking at how that slowed down the process. And instead, we published the clip data into an Azure queue. And using queue storage, that meant we could have another Azure function on the other side in back office with a queue trigger, detects that there's an entry, go grab that entry and save to the database. So we could throttle how quickly things were being saved to the database. Or we could see the queue trigger ran, go grab a bunch of messages, process all of them, and as one batch, commit to the database. So we had options that we could use to grow that. The final question that we had in November was, do I make this open source or not? And I'm a very community-focused person, and I was going to be building this live on stream, which meant that it was going to be, at the very least, source open. And I wanted to make sure that folks could see and learn from the techniques I was using, building and working with Azure Static Web Apps, using Blazor, and let that grow and see what we could do to make this also a teaching experience. However, there's a number of other folks that were out there building Twitch clip services. If ClipTalk's successful, I don't want other folks to have access to the source code and be able to start running with it. Additionally, the way that ClipTalk syncs then and loads from Twitch, you can easily exploit that to knock down Twitch, to literally turn up the throttles that I put in to limit the number of queries and have it query and load all the data all the time. So I wanted to be a good internet citizen and not let that happen. So we worked on that, and we tuned and added these features, and we got through to January 2021. And at this point, we had 20,000 clips. 20,000 clips! Are you kidding? Oh, and at this point, ClipTalk started to show some goals, started to meet some of these new features. And I started to go around and talk to some of my colleagues about Azure, about Blazor, about working with .NET. And we started to see that it became a great vehicle to explore new Microsoft Azure features. It gave me a way to provide feedback to the Azure teams about their services. I spoke at length with folks on the Azure Static Websites team and the Azure Functions team about how those features worked and how we could interact with them and allow a high volume website that I thought ClipTalk would turn into, allow it to work with those features better. We also saw that ClipTalk became a way for us to promote Blazor WebAssembly with a large data set. 20,000 clips that you're searching through and presenting and able to see all this content. and it was starting to feel like a social media site, and it was built with Blazor WebAssembly. Really cool stuff that was just starting to crawl. It was just starting to grow. Well, let me tell you, we then started to see that in February, we had 500,000 clips, 500,000 clips, right? It's only a month later. We've gone from 5 to 20,000 to now 500,000 clips in 3 months. Oh boy, we better be able to search and find clips. Well, Azure Search, Azure Cognitive Search is out there and will help me create an index that can be queried at a RESTful endpoint. And that will allow me to index Azure Tables, Cosmos DB, SQL Server, and I'm using Azure Tables. So I can work with that, and I get 2 gigs of storage for free. You say the word free to me and Azure Services, and I'm on it like a bum on a bologna sandwich. Let's go get it. That sounds great to me. And then I can reuse my Azure table storage that I already had to allow searching with channels and clip titles. So to be able to do that type ahead search, you start typing C# and it would autocomplete. Here's the name of the channel. Or I would start typing the name of a clip and it would go find that for me. Great stuff. So my architecture started to grow up. Here I am. This is the way things were at that initial working point in November, December 2020. And we started to add in Azure Search right there. And it made our user interface much more compelling and interesting because now we can search. We added a search bar up at the top and you could search for channels. And then we had another screen that you could go to and search for clips and see thumbnails of those clips that you searched for right away. And it started to feel even more like a social media site. And folks wanted to give me feedback. Oh, I like this. I don't like this. I really am looking forward to this feature. So I stood up a feedback site. Just put together a little app service that's running a tool called Fider, Fider. You can find it at getfider.com. I stood up the smallest Postgres database. So this little Go-based application, I stood up, I pointed it at Postgres, and it would allow folks to send us comments. Fantastic. I had someplace to get community feedback that could feed into my workflow, and I could plan and schedule when I would add new features to the website. And at this point, it's March of 2021, and I've hit 1 million clips. Oh boy, 1 million clips. That's a lot. And at this point, I'm still very American centric. And that's something that a lot of folks kind of fall into the trap of in the tech space, being very American centric. And the folks that were watching online said, hey, it'd be great if you could localize some of the content for my language. So we added localization capabilities and started learning how to build resource management, localization, globalization features with Blazor. And we even made an open source repository for folks from all over to submit translations. I don't know how to speak other languages besides English. And even then, I'm American. I don't barely speak English well. You know what I'm saying? So Fider.io, that's where it is now. Okay. So I didn't know it moved. So look, we started collecting and getting submissions of here's translations, and I left it completely open source. Anybody could contribute and tweak and tune and add new languages. And we started adding languages to a dropdown so folks could get the website in their language. We also used a little bit of JavaScript trickery here to identify what language you have your browser set up with and force the culture inside the Blazor application to that language by default. So if you're using a browser that's configured to present in Danish, it will automatically detect and present the content in Danish. You could then override with the drop-down control that we had there and present that in English if you'd like, or what have you, if you preferred a different language. But it would go with what it detected was your initial defaults. We also had some folks that were using Farsi, and we wanted to make sure that we supported right to left presentation of text as well. So we figured out a way to do that, and we wrote a little block of text in here so that right at the top of the website, we had a div, and we used the dir attribute here to look at the Blazor culture that was configured. And if the Blazor culture supported right to left, we outputted the RTL attribute. Easy to do when you think about it and break it down, but having to analyze and go find that was something that was an interesting task that they don't talk too much about in the documentation. So I felt good about that at that point. Now, we started to change tech in April of 2021. We started to see some issues, and we wanted to tune and move things around. So we went from Azure Storage to MySQL. The latency in table storage was just too high. The query time to load and get stuff out of table storage and present it in what's intended to be a very highly interactive website just took too long. The amount of time that I was writing data into those tables, the writes were very expensive. So I didn't want to continue doing that because I started to see some real cost coming down for a website that was only 4 months old. I looked at Cosmos DB, and it wasn't structured the way that I think of my data at this point. And I wasn't using geographic replication. So it wasn't it wasn't a service that was right for me. So I introduced a repository pattern over top of that table storage at the time so that I could start to move and migrate to another architecture. And this is where I started to run into the first of my troubles because I said, you know what? Let's use MySQL. So I took my repository pattern, created MySQL flavored repositories, and swapped those in. We also cleaned up a little bit of the data that was out there, and we reduced the amount of clips that we had. Some bad data that we had out there. We're back down to 500,000 clips. Well, there's several drivers for MySQL with Entity Framework available, and many of them weren't very reliable. So we had to work through that, and eventually we found one that worked, the Pomelo drivers. Azure Functions, though, can scale horizontally as needed. However, hosted MySQL has a limit of 100 connections. Do you see where this is going, friends? I DDoSed my own database. When it would go and scan and load new clips, those queues would fill up and say, oh, we've got all these clips that need to be added to the database. So the Functions app inside of back office would start more instances, and they would go and connect it into the queue storage, pull out the clips that they needed to add, and each one of those instances would set up a connection pool of 10 to 50 connections into MySQL and go try and do their inserts all at the same time. Well, when you have 10 instances of an Azure function, and each one of those instances is setting up between 10 and 500 connections, I couldn't connect to my own database because all of the connection pool was all of the available connections on the database were consumed by the back office processes. Oh no. We also then realized we don't have any backup nodes. We have one big database. So I introduced a read-only replica. It doubled my initial MySQL costs, and I still needed to use Azure Storage to load the search index. I didn't want to manage setting that up somewhere. So, okay, I can work with that. So I had this architecture where we had Azure Search out there working with table storage, and I started to pull things back, and I dropped in MySQL, and I had an additional table out there that was used for Azure Search. Okay. We're getting somewhere. We've simplified, and we don't have those channel JSON files laying out there on disk to load. But my Azure Static website is chugging along just great. The whole time, I'm not updating and changing architecture there. It's doing the things that I need and keeping the application running. I'm just moving around the deck chairs inside of the Azure functions for my back office synchronization and the database. That's where my challenges are. And I started to see some costs and some business challenges happening. In April, here I am with 500,000 clips at this point as I had cleaned up a little bit. I went from an initial starting point coming out of 2020 into 2021 with costs of $0 for free services, and I started getting out to about $200 a month. Oh boy. Okay. All right. I mean, $200 a month is not bad. It's for when you think about a service, but I didn't have a lot of traffic yet. It's something that I can kind of write off as hobby fees, but it's not making Mrs. C Sharp Fritz very happy. So we got to do something about that. And then I accidentally misconfigured App Insights, and a bill came in one month for $4,000. When you see a hosting bill come in for $4,000 because you misconfigured your static website, and instead of it loading a couple meg of data a day, it loaded a terabyte of data. Oops. I went hat in hand to the Azure support folks. I said, I made a mistake here. This should not have loaded all this out here. It's clearly, when you look at the configuration, it's clearly a mistake because the App Insights traffic is flat, and all of a sudden, in the last 2 weeks, there's a giant terabyte-sized spike. They said, we understand, and they refunded my money. But you should have heard how angry Mrs. C# Fritz was. We continued. Yes. So at this point, we reached out, we talked to some folks, and the folks at Progress Software generously offered to sponsor to help cover some of the costs and allow me to use their tools to help present and make development of ClipTalk features easier and more interactive for folks to learn about. All right. So I also formed an LLC to manage the cost and risk and get that stuff coming from my checking account and put it somewhere else. And then we started talking about adding artificial intelligence. We get into June 2021, and now we've got 3 million clips in the database. And we're feeling good about that MySQL database. But we were able to search the clips for titles. Wouldn't it be great if you could search based on the content of the clip? What was actually said during the clip? Nobody does this. You can't even do this on YouTube. You can't search for something that was said during the clip. If you were to go over to YouTube and search for One Small Step for Man, you're not going to find Neil Armstrong walking on the moon unless it's written in the title or the description. You're not going to find it from the transcript. So what I did was I added transcription services with folks from Assembly AI. So we would transcribe clips as they arrive and store the results inside of a transcription table and run the search index against it. All right. So our architecture with MySQL looked like this. And now we're going to add Assembly AI in. So as back office runs, it's going to find clips and we're going to load out using the Assembly AI service that's out there across the cloud. All right. We're getting somewhere here. Now, we need to update how we're syncing data with Twitch at this point. We're looking at 3 million clips, and we want to do the transcription services. The transcript is going to take a few seconds, easily a few seconds, 5 to 10 seconds, actually. So instead of just putting it into a queue, we need to not just put it into a queue, but we want to save it into the database and do the transcript. So we introduced the service bus. And we created a topic called New Clips. So put that clip data inside the New Clips topic, and there were subscriptions that would hang off of it, and one that would save it to the clips table, and another that would generate the transcript and add it into the clips table. Update with a record that says, yes, I have a transcript, and here it is over here in another location, in another table. All right. So let's update our architecture one more time. So now that we're doing that, we need to introduce our service bus. So we added a service bus in. There it is. Back office would reach in and communicate with the service bus, publishing messages, receiving messages, saving into the database, publishing over to Azure Search, getting transcripts from out of Assembly. It's becoming a little bit complicated. And at this point in June of 2021, we're still at about 3 million clips, and the database grew to about 5 gigabytes in size. And Azure Search was approaching 2 gigabytes. Now, at 2 gigabytes, Azure Search goes from free to $75 a month. Or no, I'm sorry. It goes from $75 a month to $250 a month. Okay. Now things are starting to get a little bit dicey when we start talking about that, which also mean we were maintaining that Azure Storage code because Azure Search was loading from Azure Storage. So can we consolidate, improve the quality of that, make it a little bit easier to manage, less moving parts, and save money? So we introduced RavenDB. We started using RavenDB Cloud. It's a NoSQL database built on top of .NET, and it runs on all the cloud providers. It includes the same Lucene-based search running on Azure Search. So, okay. We set up a cluster of 3 RavenDB nodes for the same price as we were paying before, and it allowed us to merge the search, storage, and MySQL services. Plus, we got automatic backups. Fantastic. Now, RavenDB builds and manages indexes differently than we think of relational data. So, the relational architecture that we had, when we tried to just bring that and load it right into RavenDB, it did not perform well. Was not the way to use it. You want to use more of a NoSQL document-based approach, which meant that Entity Framework was going out the window. Fine, we can rewrite the repository objects again, and we started that process in August of 2021, and we're looking at about 4 million clips. So let's take a look at our architecture. Azure Static Website is chugging along and doing its thing. That API and that WebAssembly perform beautifully. Chef's kiss. But we're going to take all those things in the middle, MySQL, Azure Search, and we're going to take those out and we're going to replace them with RavenDB. And we have architecture version 3. And it took some time to go through and do this revision. And we went through, we worked through it, and we got it working well. We got it working properly and presenting the website, and we rolled that out. In November 2021, it had been several months since we had built new features. We got to build new features, stuff to go on the website, not just make it run fast. So we added a system status dashboard. And it included things like a little column graph here that was built with those Telerik components for Blazor that showed, here's how many clips were transcribed by date. And we upgraded Blazor to .NET 6 from .NET 5. We also added categories and safety warnings to clips. Because we were doing transcripts, the Assembly AI service could give us content warnings. So we could look at this clip here called Back from Vacation. And based on what was said in that clip, we knew that it was talking about vacation properties, family travel. However, there was a little bit of profanity in there and some not safe for work language in there. So we could put that content warning on there so folks could decide whether or not to actually watch that clip. So we're at 7 million clips at this point in fall of 2021. And we're going along. The database is working great. So let's in January add some more features. So we added date and category filters to the discovery page. We added the ability to see who you're following, what clips you like, and we actually got some feedback from a user who wanted so much control on their filtering, and it was something that we just couldn't accept and handle with our current structure and workload. We had other features we wanted to add, and one user that wanted to be able to filter and do things that it wasn't realistic for us to deliver. We added a streamer dashboard, and you see the little heat map that we added and a radar graph there, so you can see data about the clips, what days they're created, who were the folks that created clips that were most viewed, and the most viewed categories for the clips. We improved the search page as well. And with 9 million clips under management in January of 2022, we felt pretty good about the website. And we've added more features in April. We're still working on RavenDB and things are working great. So let's add playlists. This is something you have on YouTube. Let's allow folks to put together a group of clips that tell a story or that provide that set of highlights that you want to share with folks that talk a little bit about how the story of different events and things happen on your stream. So we made the ability to do playlist, let users select clips that are played back to back to back. And we even built in our own little playlist player there with forward and back buttons and a list of clips. And we could store this as a single record in RavenDB that had an array of clip IDs attached to it. And in that NoSQL database, these were a dream to work with because you never really would search across playlists. Playlists were something that were sitting as a list on a page somewhere that you would go and click into, or you would share a link to it, and it would read this one record that had a reference with primary keys to the exact clips it wanted to present, load that data up, and present it on screen. Not bad. A little bit over normalized maybe, but it worked well for us, and we were able to do some really fun things with this. Now, at that point, we had 10 million clips. And we wanted to do a little bit more information with the live channels that were out there. We were already tracking who was live. So let's show it on the site. So we put this sidebar together that would show here's the folks that recently went live that you follow. And since we're tracking that information, just put this little live indicator out there with a duration next to it that says, here's how long these folks are live, and allow you to click on that indicator and go watch their channel. Once again, helping provide discovery going back to Twitch so you can watch some of the channels and folks that you enjoy participating in. It was fun. But when we look at the list of live streamers and streamers that you follow, well, what about starting that algorithm so that we could suggest streamers for you to follow? We started to get to know a lot of channels that were out there on Twitch and the types of content that they had. And not just the types of content that they had, but the types of content that you liked, because we knew as a user that logged into ClipTalk what channels you followed. And we knew what channels were similar based on categories and types of clips that were being created. So we started to put together a channel suggestion feature. And we used ML.net to do this. It was pretty straightforward because there was already a sample out there in the documentation that would do movie recommendations. Hey, we see that you like Casino and Godfather 1 and Godfather 2. You know what? You might also like these other movies that are out there starring Robert De Niro, and recommend those things. So let's take that same approach and build a model that we could mine and work with inside of ClipTalk, and we'll update that behind the scenes. And we'll use a very similar methodology. If you follow the same channels as somebody else, you might like the same channels as them. Not bad. So we'll go through and we'll rebuild that model. It takes a couple minutes to rebuild, but we'll rebuild that model every 6 hours and lob it out into Azure Blob Storage. There's 11 million clips on the service at this point. No problem for us to cache that model in API functions memory. Put it out there in memory, let it sit, and folks can interact with it. No problem. So we like that. We also noticed over the summer, as we got into August of 2022, and the 16 million clips that we had out there, we noticed that our dead letter queue on the service bus started to fill up. In fact, there were several thousand messages sitting out there for processing for clips that were being downloaded and weren't handled. There was some sort of an error along the way. So we had a command line tool that we set up to reprocess those records, but forgot to run it. You know, that kind of happens when humans are involved. You forget to run things. So we attached that command line tool to a scheduled function and had it connected to a timer trigger, run it into back office Azure functions, and have it check once an hour. Hey, is there anything in the dead letter queue? Let's clean that out, update, and send things out. Things are running great. We're building and adding features to the website to make sure that we've got consistent data. It's loading properly. It's saving properly in the database. It's clean. And we've got some fun features. In September, we had decided to add a trending feature. We had about 18 million clips, and we started to recognize as clips are coming in, as folks are broadcasting live, hey, there's a lot of folks on these channels, on these categories. Let's put together a little bit of a trending page that would show you here's the categories of the channels that are live that folks are currently watching and how many people are watching. Because when we got the live channel records, we knew how many people were watching each channel. So we were already doing that query for our back office sync operations to find new clips. Well, let's just put it on screen somewhere so folks can see that. And when we get those live channel records, we also get a thumbnail. So let's put the thumbnail up as well, along with that channel name. We're reusing data that we already had in the database and adding an API into our API function, along with a screen into our Blazor application to present content. So we use the little bar graph component here from Progress, and we grabbed a tool that would allow us to build a word cloud. And I forget if this was somebody else's tool or if this was Progress's tool to give us a word cloud that we could put below it so you could see the commonly used topics in the titles of both the broadcast and the clips. And you see a lot of people are talking about Silent Hill at this time when we took the screenshot. Well, we're going through and we're doing all this, and we're getting into October. There's 20 million clips now in the application. We need to figure out how to start covering some of our costs. Let's talk about advertising. We've got concerns about advertising on around streamer videos. If I'm going to put an ad around your video, how do I deal with that? Do I set up revenue share? And I want to make sure that my advertisers match with the content that we're presenting. And we already wanted to build some unique Twitch viewing features that folks might want to pay for that would help offset some of our costs. In talking to folks around the industry, we identified and learned that we had some interesting market data that nobody else had because of how we were analyzing the clips, and we were only looking at that metadata that our back office features were collecting. So let's take some of that viewership data, the transcripts that we had, use a little bit of analysis to build a monthly report on some of those topics discussed. These were some revenue plans that we had as we were looking forward. At this point in October, the application was becoming a little bit more complex. At this point, we had 15 projects inside of Visual Studio as we're looking at the Solution Explorer here. We had 70 HTTP APIs that we had built to manage the website. We had a ton of triggers that were both HTTP triggers, queue triggers, service bus triggers, timer triggers that were all running in back office to do our sync, to do data aggregation, and send data out there. We had a bunch of services that worked with RavenDB to manage data access, and custom APIs and tools that we built to allow us to interact with Twitch and mine and work with that data. We also built a little administrative website that ran on the side so that while we weren't actively working on the application and sitting here, they don't have, okay, thank you, Thindall. While we weren't sitting here actively working on the website, we could log into an admin website and tune and make changes to the behavior of the application. We had our Blazor app. We had a series of custom components that we built that we could share between the Blazor app and the static website. You see static web down there. That was the SEO, the search engine optimized version that was built with ASP.NET Core. So we shared the components between them so we could reuse and get some simple functionality being presented to the search engines without a whole lot of formatting on it. Well, at this point, as we closed out 2022, we learned a bunch of things. Building a website business is hard. There's a lot you need to figure out, and getting and establishing revenue to grow and make sure that we could fund that was a process that we weren't ready for. There was a lot of time and dedication. I spent many late nights fixing things, tweaking, making sure that scheduled processes worked through properly. I was attempting to do organic marketing, and it just was not working. I needed to do some placements with folks, getting other folks talking about the application so that more viewers would identify and start coming through to the application. I also figured out that your favorite technology might not be the right choice. I really enjoyed using Azure Storage, but it wasn't, and MySQL, but it wasn't working out for me. So I moved and learned all about RavenDB, and it worked well. In November 2022, we've got 20 million clips, and we started running into a problem again. The indexing needs are just too much. With 20 million clips, the database indexing in RavenDB is literally constantly running. The I/O, the amount of time that RavenDB is writing to disk, is overwhelming their capabilities. I had 3 nodes that were running inside my RavenDB cluster, and they were constantly indexing, writing, and leaving no threads for queries to come through and work with data. Now, I could grow the database vertically, but it would also double my database bill. That's not going to work. I could add more nodes, but where does that end? How much more capacity does that give me? Well, let's take some steps first. In December 2022, we brought the next purge. There were millions of clips on ClipTalk that had 0 views. Why are we managing these? We're wasting gigabytes to store this data. Roughly 1 million clips is a gigabyte of data, and we're storing it for free, and nobody's reading them. So we deleted 5 million clips that had 0 views, and we removed channels that had no clips that had been added within the previous 6 months. We removed and we limited the interactions with channels that were inactive. And that got us down to 15 million clips. Going into January, we started evaluating and doing our next change of technology. Phase 3. We're at 16 million clips in the database. And in talking to folks that worked on SQL Server, they said, we see you've got this application. We think we can help you out here because we have the ability to grow and store a heck of a lot more data in a smaller database. Tell me more. We could run 2 SQL databases on Azure, have one set up to replicate and have that be our read database, and have the other one be the primary with read-write operations. All right, so let's reevaluate. How's that going to impact our architecture? Well, we had RavenDB in the middle there. Well, we're going to swap out RavenDB now, and we're going to have 2 databases, SQL 1 and SQL 2. All right. The rest of the stuff is still running very well. The Azure functions behind the scene are chugging along and scaling out appropriately and nicely and handling it. And because we get millions of executions for free, that runs great. And the Azure static website, there is no tuning or maintenance needed here. It's doing its job and scaling appropriately when we get pressure for folks reading and interacting with the website. I like that. I like that a lot. So we started planning that next change of technology. We know that repeated queries against SQL Server might not be needed. We can do some things to improve that. So let's add Redis into the middle to cache some of those results so we're not constantly hitting SQL Server. So things like the popular list of clips on each channel, the recent clips on each channel, and the list of currently live channels. Let's move all those to a Redis cache where we can allow that to sit in memory, have very low latency read, and present with very quick interactions there. So let's update that architecture. Here we are, architecture 4. We added this 2 SQL servers, and now we're going to add in a Redis database. I'm getting a circular a disk tower over here. It looks like, my gosh, it's starting to look like Stacy's MVP trophy here with all the disks on it. Okay, so look, it's growing. Not bad. I like this. We've got 16 million clips in there, but we hit a problem in January. ClipTalk started becoming a little bit more adult. Something happened in January where what became known as the hot tub meta happened. There were a couple of attractive folks that would set up a children's wading pool in their apartment, in their home, in their family room, and they would climb in and play around in this children's wading pool with a camera on them. Okay. I wanted to keep ClipTalk family friendly while folks still want to be able to see this content. So I had been working with, I had already built a feature for my live stream that used Azure Computer Vision. It would report a raciness score based on a photo that you would send it. So let's scan thumbnails in those particular categories that are being used inside this hot tub meta that was happening, and take a look and determine whether something is racy or not. So we decided if a thumbnail had a 90% raciness score, blur it. And there's one of the blurred images there. I wanted to make sure I keep this family friendly for the event. I think we did a good job with that, Stacy, okay? And we added a racy content warning, put a little eyeball there so that you weren't scanning through and scanning through ClipTalk and all of a sudden there were folks that were viewing the website from parts of the world where they're a little bit more religious, they're a little bit more conservative, and I didn't want them to scroll down and all of a sudden go, "Oh my gosh, what's that? There's somebody who's wearing a swimsuit and showing way too much skin," or whatever it is they might be doing. So the racy content, we also made sure would never appear on the anonymous discovery feed. So if you didn't log in to ClipTalk, this content never was eligible to be displayed. But once you logged in and it started presenting content, even though it might have been popular, we hid it from you by default. All right. So that was an initial, a second step into doing machine learning and artificial intelligence. So as we're thinking, so we get done adding that, we're into February, we're going to bring in SQL Server. How do we start searching now? We're doing the migration, and we recognize that SQL Server search is with text, full text search is slow. How do we do this? How do we get around this? So we brought in Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is the same tool that's used underneath the covers by Azure Search, but we could control and scale it and manage it appropriately for us and customize that as need be. So let's add another subscription into our service bus that it will allow us to manage Elastic. So here we go. There's the architecture. Azure Static website is doing just fine here, but we're going to add another data store. There, we're adding Elastic now to the bottom. Man, okay, we don't have quite as many disks as Stacy has on her MVP trophy, but we're getting there. All right, and we're going to interact with that with the service bus so that we manage our search index over inside Elastic. And in April 2023, we finally finished migrating 25.6 million clips, 8.2 million channels. Holy smokes. It took 4 months to migrate the database from RavenDB to SQL Server and go live. Not just SQL Server, but SQL Server and Elastic and Redis. Okay? We took RavenDB, one database system, and we swapped it out for 3 more. That's a lot. That's a lot of moving pieces that we just put into place. And things were working well. The next few months were all about tuning and optimizing the indexes and queries in that SQL Server database. All of the Azure App Service functions ran beautifully, scaled amazingly. And I had no problems with them. It was always the database. The data interactions were always where I struggled. And at this point, my ClipTalk transcriptions started to become expensive. We're processing thousands of clips a day, and we only process those with 5 or more views we would transcribe. Was it 5 or 3? I can't remember. Assembly AI couldn't keep up with the traffic that was coming through. Even though we had a service bus that would receive messages back when the transcript was done, load it up and save it into the data store, it was just taking way too long because we had one Assembly AI service that we were pushing into. So could we create multiple processors, run more transcription services? At this point in June of 2023, we've got 27 million clips. That's about 27 gig of data hanging out there. So our next tech change came in. Let's look at using OpenAI. We knew OpenAI was starting to hit, and there was a model called Whisper that would allow us to do transcripts from audio. And I could run those transcripts on a Raspberry Pi. Fortunately, I happen to have 6 Raspberry Pi 4s laying around, and I had already done some demos and some tests learning how to run Kubernetes on them. Fantastic. So I already had a Raspberry Pi tower sitting there. We could deploy 8 transcription containers to the 5 secondary Raspberry Pi devices. So the primary would control and set direction and allow the deployment and the running of each one of those services on the other 5 devices. Brilliant. Looked good. Really happy about that. Each one of those transcription containers that would run over there would allow us to, in each service, download a Twitch clip, convert it to an MP3. I actually used FFmpeg there directly on the Raspberry Pi. Run the OpenAI Whisper model on it locally so that I would get from that MP3 my transcript, and then upload the transcript into my APIs in my ClipTalk API project that would then save it off and allow it to be handled for processing. All right, architecture diagram again. So here we go. I've got my stack of cylinders there in the middle. I've got Assembly AI as a cloud over there, but we're going to swap them out for my stack of Raspberry Pis. And they live right on the bookshelf behind me here in my home office. And let me tell you, Mrs. C# Fritz and the dog and the kids heard that fan running at all hours of the night, and they're like, what the heck is going on in Dad's office over there? Yeah, that was a thing. And tech changed again. In July of 2023, we were at 30 million clips, and Twitch launched a new clip discovery service natively called your personalized feed. ClipTalk's visitations plummeted as my costs were rising. I was struggling. I even had Raspberry Pis running locally that was generating and pushing content up into the database that was running on Azure. We took ClipTalk offline July 17, 2023. Why? You can't compete with native features. So what did we learn? If you're building a website and you're not building UI features, you're not attracting new visitors. Building an application as a sidecar to an existing service is pretty risky because that service can change and move. And they changed their API several times, and we were flexible and moved with it. However, architecture changes are your enemy. Even though you designed a flexible architecture, you need to make sure that it can grow with your website. Every time you're rewriting code, you are not building features. Those are sunk costs that you will never get back, and it better be worth it to come back through there. Do your homework. Simple math on the amount of data storage that I was using should have told me that this wasn't going to work. We had only barely touched on the number of folks that were interacting with Twitch, and I was already spending hundreds of dollars a month in data storage and interaction and processing to make all of that work. We learned that large streamers like Dr. Lupo would generate more than 1,000 clips a day. That means just for his channel, for each day, we'd get a meg of storage we had to allocate. Now, that's a meg of storage for the metadata for those clips and another meg of storage in the search index for those clips. So Dr. Lupo, for each day that he was broadcasting in my architecture, would consume 2 megabytes of data. By the end of the month, that's 60 megabytes of data. You see where this is going. It didn't scale. Twitch has hundreds of streamers like Dr. Lupo, and I still wasn't indexing 5% of them. That's hard to go against. But I did make a good decision to store metadata. The database was growing way too fast, and there were other services that were storing the video. Those services ran out of money quickly and fell over, and folks weren't able to interact with them because it was just too much. I could have pivoted and only stored interesting clips and pushed ad hoc queries back to Twitch and not actually store that data locally. The one thing that never changed as I was building this website was my Azure static website. The static website grew and scaled with my application with no code changes. The cost was minimal. The cheapest thing that I ran every month, even when I got to the end in July of 2023, was my Azure static website. It used the website, the APIs beautifully. As I started to add in caching, the Azure functions that ran cost little to nothing in my bills each month. Okay. It was an amazing choice for building a highly interactive website. If I were to build another website that was going to be as interactive as ClipTalk, that I needed to scale, that was going to have lots of fun logic and APIs, I'm going to be on that Azure Static Web. I want to make sure that I give you a little bit of a post note here about that Twitch discovery feed that was rolled out in July of 2023. They updated their mobile app in June of 2024. The clip discovery feed was moved to a pivot at the top. Channels and clips you'll see at the top of the Twitch app. The clip searching feature that I featured, that I promoted, that was key to ClipTalk's success, was never completed and delivered on Twitch. As of August 2024, all users of the Twitch app now have the new discovery feed feature in there. And it's been panned by experts and users alike as a terrible update and called garbage. Since then, Clip Discovery has been removed from the Twitch website. Thank you so much for listening to my story about ClipTalk. It was an amazing 3 years. It was an amazing 3 years of development and fun that we spent building this application. I loved it with all my heart. And I'm so glad I got to spend that time with you. Thank you for taking some time and listening to my story about an application that we built.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
too.
much for that, Todd. I was not expecting that ending.
Right? Right?
I
That's
knew that ending, and I still had a journey.
yes. I'm kind of
Like
glad that
11
I
Getting a little
wasn't.
misty here, friends, okay?
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting this. You wouldn't believe last night I'm going through clips and videos and finding some of these data points and making sure that things are right. And it was such a trip down memory lane.
I can
Mhm.
imagine. It's. I joined you for some of that journey on Twitch.
Yep.
It
Mhm.
was so much fun to be on that, and the app was fantastic. And yeah, I'm not
Agreed.
surprised that you're getting misty.
Yeah. We had a lot of fun with it. I still want to publish the source code at some point. There are things I need to redact from it, but I do want to publish the source code and write a bit of a wrap up to it, because sharing the story like this is something that I think a lot of folks that are taking that journey and stepping down and saying, I want to build a website, I want to build a web application. Let me share what I learned. Let me share my
Yeah.
journey.
Like a web
Absolutely.
application at scale,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And absolute truth. And the two of you, I know you'd been in many of the streams. The static website was rock solid and literally didn't change at all during it.
No.
So
Yeah.
Thank you.
I must say that I agree with you 100% about the Twitch app update as well. It got so much worse when you tried adding this feature to it. It's terrible.
It was not received well.
Kill the competition and then do it badly.
Yes.
I think that there's something that we need to bring up on screen, and
Please.
I love this from Scott. And so
Oh,
it really was. It's as I put in the chat, not halfway through, about 3/4 of the way through. As we were talking about before you came on, my mind is mush. I have health issues anyway, so 6 hours is a long time for me. I was transfixed. That was a stunning ending. Thank you so much.
Oh gosh, Stacy, thank you so much for having me, and Eric. It was so much fun to share, and the fact that I'm able to recount and share this with friends like this, and that you were able, you enjoyed and you caught on, and thank you so much. Not just to you, but to you folks out there that are watching. We really appreciate you taking the time to stick with us and learn about what you can do with Azure Static Web Apps.
Absolutely. We have one question.
Sure, go for it.
And that it's also from Scott. The Raspberry Pis, was that used for converting it to MP3?
Not just converting to MP3s. You're right. Not just. So I had a container app that I built it with .NET. I think it was .NET 7 at the time. But I used the FFmpeg library. There's a bridge NuGet package you can install. So I had the FFmpeg library installed in my container along with this NuGet library that would download, it would identify the location of the clip on Twitch, download the MP4, convert it to an MP3 using FFmpeg, and then it would run the Whisper OpenAI model to do the transcription. It would analyze the MP3, turn it into text, and send that text up to the service bus where it would get picked up and eventually saved into the database.
Did you ever notice that on your internet bandwidth? I mean, you were downloading all of these clips off of Twitch. No.
But each one of the clips was maybe a meg. I wasn't requesting the highest quality. I just needed I could get the 320 pixel quality, because what I was interested in was the audio. The picture size didn't matter to me. So I would request the smallest size one, convert to the MP3, and do the transcription.
Yeah.
So
and then
you're right.
I have a question that I need to ask.
Sure, go for it.
Bang hat.
I can't believe you. Wow, it's an IRL chat stream command. Love that. So for those of you out there who don't know what Stacy's referring to, on my stream right there, you see C# Fritz. You can execute the !hat command, and there's an AI that'll take a picture of my hat and tell you about it. So yes, I have. It's Halloween, and I did have a chicken costume on earlier, and I got to about 15 minutes before the session here, and I said, "It's too hot. I gotta take this off." So I at least wore this. So this is, and I'll get a little bit closer there. It's the Headless Horseman in orange embroidered thread there. There you go. So
It looks awesome.
my daughter was home from college this last weekend before, and we went to a place called, there it is, Sleepy Hollow Haunted Acres. It was a haunted hayride. There was a haunted house there. It's a farm that they turned the back half of the fields in the at the end of the summer, in the fall, into an attraction. And we went over there and walked through. And as we're coming out of the haunted house, there's a merch stand set up, and they're selling T-shirts and hoodies and hats. And if you know anything about me with hats, friends, I love a good hat.
Gotta get the hats.
And I saw this one, and I thought, for a Halloween hat that is the orange and black with the Headless Horseman, that is a beautiful, amazing hat, and I had to pick it up. I haven't taken this off. Like, I had a different hat on stream today, but all through the last week and a half, I've literally been wearing this hat the whole time. Like,
Awesome.
I really, really like this one. So yeah, I've got the Sleepy Hollow Headless Horseman hat. So
Awesome.
Is your hat collection on your website up to date?
no, it's right.
Because we're talking about a collector here.
Yeah.
Could it ever be up to date? That's a different question.
It could, and I think we're going to add that to the to-do list for when we get on the other side of .NET Conf and Ignite and some of these events that are coming up in November. On the other side of the fall conference season here, we'll get that up to date, because there's features out there. There's another Azure Static website, my hats website, hats.csharpfritz.com. That's an Azure Static website, Blazor WebAssembly on the front end, and it's Azure Blob Storage on the back end. So yeah, there's another one. Thank you for pointing that out. Yep. So,
Awesome.
so much fun.
And I think it's one thing that I absolutely have to say. Anybody who's not seen Jeff's streams, go watch them. They are awesome. And more than that, the charitable things that you do on your stream are also absolutely spectacular.
Oh, thank you. There are folks who get into streaming and they want to make money, they want to be famous and that kind of thing. And I was doing this I wanted to teach people, I wanted to grow a community, and to turn around and be able to say, you know what, we're going to take subscriptions, we're going to take cheers that folks want to share. No pressure to do those, and hand out those off to charities like St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and help fight cancer. Hand it off to the Raspberry Pi Foundation. Hand it off to the American Cancer Society, and pay it forward to some of these organizations. It's an amazing thing that I'm proud that we're able to do as a tech community. I'm just happen to be the face that's writing code and having a good time and providing a location where we can do good things together. And thank you so much, Stacy. It's absolutely a joy to do, and I've had a lot of fun with it.
Awesome. Thank you. And looking at the time, I guess unfortunately it's time to say goodbye.
Yeah.
But before we do, I've done intros. Now I want to do an outro.
Cool.
So together we've cackled in delight. You joined us, dear developers, in this wondrous rite. Now go, for knowledge awaits in the realm of the code. From this gathering of minds, let wisdom explode.
Oh, very cool. Very nice.
Very nice.
And on that note, I want to say thank you to everybody who has watched. I want to say thank you to everybody who's given up their time to talk on today. To Eric for jumping in, hosting with me at last minute notice. Again, Jessica, wishing you all the best. Wish that you were here. And yeah, it's been awesome. I really enjoyed it. And watch out, because I want to do next year with more deeper things in the paid tier and the really cool stuff you can do.
Take the last question there.
We have a last question. Okay, let's do.
Yeah.
Let's finish on a question.
Sure.
Yes.
There we go.
When designing and making a site like this, when do you draw the architecture diagram? Before coding? during, or primarily for the presentation?
For the presentation. At the point that we're building that we're building and working through the website, we didn't really need an architecture diagram because we had just 2 or 3 moving pieces and we knew how they fit together. Who was I sharing and presenting that to and needed to communicate that to? I didn't have anybody else in the team really. Every now and again, somebody would contribute some code, jump in and help me out with a feature. But I didn't need to communicate to them the whole architecture of it. I was able, for this website, I was able to segment and isolate different capabilities of it. When it came to transcription, it was easy for me to isolate and say, well, I've just got a function over here that wakes up every so often and is going to do transcriptions. Or I've got a feature over here that's going to provide the search capabilities, and I could isolate and focus on just that. I never had to communicate more than an isolated subsystem of the larger application. So it worked out for me to not have to do that and be able to share just those architecture diagrams when we have a slide deck like this at the end. So
awesome. So
Perfect.
that's a wonderful way to end it. Thank you all. And
Thank you very much, everyone.
until Halloween next year. Bye-bye.
Bye.
enjoy.